Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and good morning to those of you that have joined from overseas. So we have our next LinkedIn Live. I don't know if it's slightly unprofessional to say, but happy Valentine's, Rick.
Happy Valentine's.
So we chose the perfect day, didn't we, to catch up. But the reason we were slightly a little bit late, just starting this session, obviously we're talking today about global payroll challenges and its crucial role in DE&I initiatives. So I was just saying to Rick, sometimes this topic makes me feel nervous, uncomfortable, in respects that those people that know me know that sometimes I just say things that, just come out of my mouth and do I put my foot in things? And to me, it's such a sensitive topic and I wouldn't want to offend anyone. And so I was just talking to Rick and said, this is one topic that does actually make me feel slightly nervous because you'd never want to offend. So we were discussing that, weren't we, Rick? And I think maybe that's a common theme or feeling.
Yeah, I think that when we have these type of conversations, Melanie, it's about being open-minded, right? I think we have to understand that we have our own biases. I have my own biases based on my own experiences in the workforce, and also my cultural biases from that as well. And love to talk to you guys a little bit about what happened in the past with that. But I'll tell you just really quickly, learning about diversity and inclusion from an American perspective and then trying to apply that globally was a challenge. And one of the experiences I had, I had an office in Brazil, and I went down and I said, "Look, we've got 50 people in Brazil. This is amazing. This is a great part of our diversity inclusion. Check mark. It's our Latino part of our group. We are diverse." And I had mentioned that to our team, like I'm so proud of our diversity. And I had someone call me out on that, which I thought was really, talking about being open minded. I had someone call me out on that and said, "Wait, you talk about diversity. Brazil's population is 56% of African descent. And yet we only have two people out of 50 on our team that have African descent in our Brazilian team." And I took a step back and I said, "Wait, but we are diverse. We have Latinos. This is part of our diversity and inclusion." And I realized that was my unique biases um, when it comes to being American and kind of looking at how I apply diversity and inclusion in a global scale, but realizing that every country, every culture has their own unique component of how they define diversity and inclusion. And I think it's really important to be open minded to that because I was wrong. And I had to be educated on how diversity and inclusion actually applied in Brazil. And then I took that to what that looked like in China, and then what that looked like in India or in the UK or in South Africa. And then I had to figure out a way to actually bring inclusion into my thought process on diversity and inclusion into the business. And then I brought in different people in the organization to help us understand that and redefine it. And realizing every time we added a new country or a new set of people in that a different country, that changed our definition. And I had to be very open to that and defining those kind of initiatives that we had in the organization.
So before we just kick off, we obviously have a global audience, which is great for this topic, I think. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to use this as a forum, have it as a discussion. We do like these LinkedIn Lives to I can't think of the word to communicate with each other, to have some really good discussions. So feel free to post some comments in the comment box, and it'd be really cool to know where you guys are from. So Natalie, you're half Brazilian. Are you based in Brazil or the UK? So it'd be great to hear where everyone is from today. So okay, so D&I, what is it?
So DEI is, in my opinion, it's a way that a organization creates an environment where employees feel comfortable to share their ideas. It's a way to have a powerful collaboration on bringing ideas to the organization. I think sometimes we get confused when we say diversity and inclusion. It just means someone's race or someone's ethnicity. What does that mean? And we're hiring someone to add to our book of this, our portfolio within our employees. For me, diversity inclusion is where you create a workplace where it doesn't, regardless of what someone looks like, where someone comes from, they have an opportunity to be themselves within the organization. I think if you look at a number of organizations that have been successful, data shows that organizations that have a diverse workforce, meaning different nationalities, different languages, different cultures, different religions, they bring a different idea, different thought process to the organization, and they've shown that they've been very successful from that. So diversity inclusion for me is, I use a one-liner all the time is, you can hire anybody, bring anybody into the organization, regardless of what they look like or where they come from, and make sure that they can feel comfortable in their own skin. And making sure they also have a voice behind that and representation. Viola Davis said it the best. If you guys are familiar with Viola Davis, she said, "You can't know what you're going to achieve if you don't see yourself within that." Which to me is really important, because when people look at, especially in global workforces, they have to be able to say, "I have the opportunity to obtain that." There's a story I saw on CNN a couple of weeks ago, where this kid who is when he was a kid when Barack Obama was elected, and he said Barack Obama was elected, he knew that he could be anything in the world but president in the United States. And after Barack Obama was elected, he said, I can also be president. Now, this little boy ended up becoming a entrepreneur in a very successful business, and who just recently raised capital for that business. But he said that opportunity, that moment of seeing someone get elected, that opportunity that he could be more than what he thought he could be, gave him the opportunity to be successful and change his entire mentality. That's what diversity and inclusion to me means within the business. You're giving people, all people, gender, race, religion, opportunities to see themselves in successful roles within the organization and having a voice from that perspective. And so giving that opportunity for success allows them to be successful, in my opinion. Melody, you're on mute.
There you go. And age is also covered in that as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is so important, isn't it, to make sure everyone feels that they're capable of doing anything that they want to do. So, sorry, Natalie. I do know Natalie. I saw Natalie last week. She's like, "Hey, Natalie, it's me." So sorry about that. And again, I met Natalie last week, and I would never have known you were half Brazilian. So it's also not assuming that you know everything about people.
Yeah, when you think about diversity and inclusion, I think representation is really, when I say that matters, is creating an environment where it does, like, where someone's race, religion, gender doesn't matter. It's creating that equitable opportunity for everybody. That to me is really important. You're fostering a culture that really allows people to be who they are and be able to feel like they have a perspective and can contribute to the organization's culture. From that perspective, I think it's important. Using the example you just used with Natalie, you don't know what people are sometimes, and you don't know what they can actually bring. So sometimes when we look at someone, we judge a book by its cover. But having a culture that you don't do that, you really allow people to be who they are, and foster that everyone's equal within the organization. It really allows to create really beautiful things. Like, for example, Melanie, a lot of people don't know that I speak Spanish. People don't know that I come from a Creole background as well. And, there's a lot about me from that perspective people know because they just judge from the book's cover. But I think it's really important as you think about that, fostering a foundation of DEI within an organization truly will allow you to set yourself up for success.
Yeah, we have sometimes a situation with class in the UK, and one of the situations we have in the UK is because some people within the UK will say my accent's a common accent, so they perceive. And I was actually at a dinner once when I was explaining that my parents' background, and they're like, "Oh my god, so you're faking it then?" It's like, no, it's just the way that I am. So there are all sorts of different challenges that we have to deal with.
Well, when you say that, Melanie, actually, there are some places still in the world that still go through caste systems, right?
Yeah.
And when we talk about diversity and inclusion, it's also, again, we talk about localizing it from that perspective. It's how do you take that and dissolve that, right? How do we look at making sure, regardless of your background, that you have a seat at the table? And there's a lot of exercises to that, but employers have to be very open to that change. Sometimes we were like, this is how we've done it. This is how we've always done it. This is our culture. Um, but really taking a step back and saying that's not the culture that actually really works. We want to make sure that we have people within the organization that feels like they have opportunities. And I think that's the key word here is I have an opportunity to be successful. I have an opportunity for growth. I have an opportunity to have a voice in the organization. I think that's where that helps. But I also want to make sure, using your example of the accent, when you look at, people's names, there are a lot of reports that you can look at someone's name and go, I'm not going to hire that person just
Yeah.
because you assume what they look like. You can hear someone's accent and say, okay, I assume this is where they come from that perspective. And obviously you just said yourself that sometimes that can be wrong. But even looking at, the example of someone's race as well, there are many studies out there that show that people who have a criminal background, for example, that are white, typically have a better opportunity than people of color because of that social kind of differences and kind of nuances within kind of the workforce. So it's how do you break that down? How do you allow people to have cultural names and different nuances and not have those unique biases within that and think, okay, only this is the type of person we want to hire. Some of that actually comes in when you have hiring panels because again, we all uniquely have our own biases. So people tend to, and there's a lot of reports on this, people tend to hire people that look like them, feel like them, make them feel comfortable. And so having a hiring panel, for example, really does allow you to have that diversity of thought. So if multiple people are on that panel, multiple people, different genders, different races, different religions, different languages, they could add a different perspective to a candidate that you're looking to bring on without you feeling like, oh, we're just looking to hire this type of person because we're trying to be quote unquote diverse. It just gives you a different perspective. And you will end up hiring the best candidate, not just a candidate to fill a quota. And I think that's what we're trying to, with DEI, we're just trying to make sure that getting back to that word of equity or equitable opportunity, it's building that type of foundation to ensure your business is bringing on the best candidates. Again, the data shows, you can't lie with data. Data shows that diversity really helps businesses and fortifies them and makes them very strong. But we have to, again, we are human. We have our unique biases. So bringing other people into the conversation, like a diversity hire panel, that does allow you to be more successful.
Yeah, really good idea. So why is it important to monitor this?
Well, I think because sometimes it can go off the rails. Um, I always like to talk my own experiences where we've made mistakes ourselves. Where there was a situation where we had within our organization, you're in the day to day, you don't really think about it, and then you look up and you go, "Wait, this just happened." We had a hiring boom. We did a lot of hiring at one point. And we had a sales organization that we realized that we didn't have any diversity in our hiring. We hired almost the same exact person for every role within the sales organization. It was about 15 people. And we looked up one day and go, wait, there's really no diversity in this region. And why is that? Where that region's a very diverse region. And then we spoke to the hiring manager, and her response was, I didn't think about that. I wasn't thinking about that. I was just hiring what I normally hire. But then we realized, and she admitted that. She goes, my background's this is where I come from, this is what it is. She hired people who she was typically comfortable with. And again, everyone that we hired were really good people, but we gave no opportunity. There was no candidates. There were no opportunities for people to be part of those conversations. So we had to really, really think about how we were going to actually go after our candidate pool. So were we just sourcing on LinkedIn? Did we go to colleges? Did we go to different locations in different regions within that market to say, hey, let's maybe source from this market as well? We've also went out to, we did benchmarking with our competitors and saw they're hiring diverse candidates. How do we get those diverse candidates too? And really start to think about different ways to make sure we had diversity in the organization, but still are hiring the best candidate. Since then, we've been able to bring on some diverse candidates. Not the best that we want. We're still working through some of that. Still working through some of that now, but at least it was at the top of mind to make sure that we brought in the best, no matter what. But we gave opportunities for everybody.
Because I heard of one situation where a company were looking to employ more female engineers, and the countries that they were currently located in, they just couldn't find, the talent pool wasn't there. So what they started to do was a study of where can we find more female engineers, and they went to, I think it was somewhere like Greece, I want to say, I may be slightly wrong, but going to another country where they could hire more female engineers.
But DEI, it's not something that just comes off naturally, right? Again, we talked about our unique biases. It is something you proactively have to do. So something like that's actually a really smart move. It's do the research. What are you looking to do within the organization? What's your end goal? Now, I've seen a lot of organizations say, starting next month, we're going to do this, and this is what we're going to be, and we're going to hit these numbers in 6 months. And realistically, that's not going to happen. That's that a real DEI initiative within the organization takes time. And it takes taking 2 steps forward, making take 2 steps back to get 3 steps ahead. But it really is thinking about, okay, what's your end goal? What's your North Star here? What are you looking to actually accomplish? And then what are your milestones and your check-in points to make sure that you're actually accomplishing those goals? I've never really seen a plan that's turned on within 30 days actually be very successful. You've got to be mindful of it, because again, as you put those plans together, you're going to have to, you're going to fail a little bit as well. You're going to have to learn through that. But hopefully your end goal is, it may take a year, it may take 2 years to get there, but it really allows you opportunities to check in, make sure you're doing it the right way, and have relevant points to make sure the organization can do business transformation. Because anytime you have a significant change like this, it takes the business to be on board with it. It takes the business to have this put into the foundation of their organization and their culture. If they don't do that, or they try to do it rapidly, it never really works.
Because I know in Dubai at the moment they've got Emiratisation being introduced, where they're trying to encourage, or it's a legal requirement to have more local employees work for your organisation. So I know, again, that's a new thing that companies are looking at, and to make sure that they're compliant. Everything else. So one of the things that you did mention is when companies say, right, okay, we're monitoring it, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Typically, who within an organisation, who looks after it? Is it the HR department, or who monitors the?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say. I think HR typically is the one that ends up having that conversation and trying to manage that within the organization. Realistically, it's got to come from the top down and the bottom up. Everyone's got to be forefront about it. The leadership team has to be on board. If you say HR is on board, but the CEO is not on board with it, it's never going to work. Because there's dollars and budgets that go into that as well that you have to think about, and the CEO signs off on that. The employees have to be on board with it, because the employees have to make sure they're managing the leadership and holding us accountable for what that looks like as well. So if we're saying that we're going to be diverse, if we're saying that we're going to have an inclusive environment, that we're going to give opportunities for everyone for promotions and growth and equity pay, then the employees also have to be the ones that say, hey, this isn't working, or hey, this is not going the way that you said it was. How can we get to that North Star that you promised us? But it's not happening. So the employees have to. So it's a 360 in my viewpoint, that it has to be from a 360 view. But realistically, it's got to start from the top, because the top has to sign off on it.
Yeah. So from the payroll side, I'm hearing more and more payroll leaders getting involved. So how does diversity, equity, and inclusion intersect with global payroll practices?
Yeah, in the world that we live today with remote work, you can work anywhere in the world, and you can do the same job. And so again, employers are finding that remote work does work, and you can find the best talent. You don't have to just source within your postal code. But the difference with that, I think what's really important, is that people are starting to say, well, I'm doing the same job as someone that is in the UK, and I may be living in India. And so how do you balance that out? We've heard that come up a lot. It's like, why am I making less or making more? Well, no one really complains about more, but how am I making less than someone that I'm doing the same exact job, and I'm just in a different location? So having conversations about benchmarking, balancing, cost of living is really important. Looking at, when you're benchmarking, what threshold do you want to be in? Do you want to be in the 50th percentile, the 75th percentile, the 95th percentile? and then balancing that according to the cost of living in that particular country. And you can outline that with employees, because if you pay someone, for example, in India, the same amount that you pay someone in the UK, the cost of living is very different from that perspective. So someone can be living like a king in India versus someone that's in the UK, which is typical middle class salary. So you've got to look at how to balance that out from that perspective and have those conversations. But having the tools and the process and procedures behind them to justify what that looks like does help with some of those conversations that you have. But just hiring people and paying certain salaries doesn't do that. So from a payroll perspective, as part of the conversation with HR and your leadership team, you really should be looking at benchmarking and establishing those policies up front, so that when offers do go out, there's a way to validate that and keep that checked within the organization.
Yeah, so some of the common challenges that we're finding from the payroll side is actually the benchmarking side of things, and to get that resource. So I know there are organisations that do that service or solution, but I know that is sometimes a challenge. And actually, one of the challenges is that the organisation, so you're told to do the benchmarking or to find out, but the organisation doesn't want to actually pay for that service. And it's for the organisation to actually understand it's a really important service to actually understand.
Yeah, I think that was important. And I spoke about this a little bit earlier, which is you've got to have sign off from the leadership team.
Yeah.
There's budgets that go into that. So yes, there's enough for an investment to see, are we at market? Are we above market? Are we below market? When we actually are looking at talent, that's going to be very important. So you're going to have to convince the leadership team of that. But the plus side of that is it's not just about diversity and inclusion; it's about retention. So when you're looking at the market and you're seeing that, hey, we're grossly underpaying people in the market, you know that your employees are going to find another role with another organization that's going to significantly pay, and they're gonna move. And I know that we can't always just quickly change our budgets and salaries. Those are things that are put out a year in advance. But you do need to look at where you're standing at, and you can actually plan according to that. And that investment up front is not just from a DEI opportunities, retention, and how you actually continue to scale your business in the future as well.
So are there any other challenges organisations face when integrating D&I principles into their global payroll processes?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is just the change, right? We all want to do the right thing, but at the same time, we don't know if we want to take 2 years to do it, right? So the timing is always really important. But outside of implementation, it's also holding yourselves accountable behind it. So I've seen multiple times, and I spoke with many organizations where they've said, "Hey, I want to put this initiative in place. We're going to put this initiative in place, or we have put this initiative in place," but they've not actually followed through with it a year later, or it's not been something that's been top of mind or top of the conversation a year later. I implore payroll and HR professionals, to really sit down and talk with other leaders, seeing how they're maintaining that, and making sure that they're holding their business accountable behind that. But it does take time, right? The biggest issue is maintaining it and continuing to manage it. Today it's a great idea because you had a problem before, but D&I should not be a painkiller. It should be an initiative that actually is for a cultural foundational piece of your business. And so, if it's a painkiller, once the pain is gone, it doesn't become a priority anymore. So that becomes the biggest issue, is just maintaining it.
Should it be a way of life? Should just be,
we say that, right? And business is business, right? So we all sit in a boardroom. We have budget meetings. We have priorities, and if from a leadership perspective, if DEI is not a priority, it goes to the bottom of the list. So it's constantly having that conversation, and then someone in that organization has to, if it's not being had, if it's not being followed up on, someone has to continue to bring it up. And I think that's where you have, like, for example, my new organization that we have a diversity and inclusion committee, and that's led by our employees, and they are keeping us accountable behind that. So if we don't talk about it, they're talking about it, and it's constantly being brought to the table.
So so I was going to ask you, should there be like an advocate in every organisation, or as you've got it as a committee, just to make sure that everyone is accountable? So that sounds like the best, depending on the size of your organisation, that sounds like the best way forward.
Yeah, I think sometimes it could be one or two people, sometimes it can be 25 people, depending on the size
Yeah.
of the organization. But it's really there to continue the conversation and make sure it's forefront. I think sometimes we get so confused when we talk about diversity and inclusion, with especially all the political media that you see out there about what diversity means or what those things mean within organizations. Diversity and inclusion is really just making sure people feel comfortable in their own skin. And
Yes.
I'll constantly repeat that, and making sure you're creating an environment that is collaborative and that increases creativity and innovation within the organization by having diversity of thought within the company. That's a win-win situation for all employers and employees. And so we just need to make sure we continue to have that conversation so everyone's aware of it.
Yeah, because when I was researching, there was a quote where somebody said that you got to be to a point. Obviously, it was said better than what I'm relaying it, but there's got to be a point where your team or your staff, your employees, feel comfortable to say what they want to say without feeling like there's going to be a repercussion on having that, their voice. And I suppose in every business, ideally, you'd want to make sure that people feel comfortable enough to actually speak out, because then that's how you move your business forward, isn't it? That's how your business changes, because you're listening to different perspectives of work, or of your company, isn't it?
Yeah, I think some of those unique biases where we're told that you know people are sometimes scared to say something, right? When
Yeah.
they feel like, hey, I'm lucky I've got this role. I'm lucky that I'm in this position. I don't want to be overly vocal. I don't want to be that stereotype. And that creates nuances within organizations where people don't use their voice. My grandmother used to say, and I think I use this saying all the time within my business, which is a closed mouth never gets fed. It's really important that your employees come to the table and they come to the table hungry, and really being able to help foster that. There's opportunities that really can, especially in a global environment, that businesses can benefit from with having a diverse environment where people are actually bringing to the table based on their own experiences, the experiences that you may never think about because you have your own unique ones. And I think that allowing people to have that conversation and making sure from a leadership perspective, you let them know it's a safe environment to do that, I think is important. But I was just watching the other day TikToks, and where people were saying, this is who I am in this workplace. And they, the TikTok where they say, like, of course, this is what I do. Of course, this is what I do. And although they're funny and you get a good chuckle out of them, you're also realizing that still, even today, that those stereotypes and tropes still exist. And unfortunately, as I started to watch more of those, I started to go, wow, this is still a problem. People still kind of innate these biases or these stereotypes with people, this type of person in the office environment or within the work environment. And so we've got to get over that. The fact that we're laughing, every joke has some truth to it, says that, hey, there's a problem still here, and we've got to figure out how to do better at it. And this is the new generation that's already catching on to some of those issues that have been around since we were young in the environment and work environment as well.
And we're talking about it, which is really, really important, because I don't think we would be talking about it 5, 6, 7 years ago so much. But we're talking about it, which is good. So do you know any examples, or do you have any examples that you've seen where organisations have successfully leveraged global payroll to advance the DEI goals? Or is it more from your own personal examples, more so that you've seen the benefits?
Yeah, I've seen some really good initiatives within organizations, specifically in the payroll, especially global payroll, having the right tools and reporting mechanisms. So there are great payroll tools out there that they can actually give you kind of reporting based on, hey, you're benchmarking versus what you're paying based on the location or country that you're paying employees in, comparing that across the globe. So there are organizations that have really good ones out there. One of my organizations as well has a really good DEI kind of reporting perspective within our environment as well. But it gave a lot of visibility. And what was interesting, even within our organization, where we think about this and we're trying this very proactively. It's nothing like seeing a dashboard with it, which is a little bit more honest from that perspective. So tools have been really deployed in many organizations that have been able to successfully help with those conversations. But I will say that again, it gets back to bringing that information to the forefront of the conversation. You've seen organizations like some of the bigger ones that have the budgets and the dollars behind it, but sometimes if you kind of read in between the lines, it's almost like this is our PR version of what we're doing, but what we're really doing is not what we're saying we're doing. So it's again getting back to what's working best for the organization. You can see those who have higher initiatives, those who are not afraid to put out kind of their quotas or where they've got diversity, how they're hiring, how many men versus women they have in leadership teams, how many hiring that they've done with people of color, how many people they don't different religions, how many languages are spoken within organizations. Those are things that we've seen successfully be deployed through reporting and gave a lot more visibility, and visibility not just to the leadership team but to the entire organization. So I've seen some of those things, but it really comes into technology allowing you to actually see that information right up front.
Have you come across people having issues collecting data at all from their workforce?
Yeah, and in some cases, yes, specifically in Europe, that comes up a lot. A lot of individuals don't want to self-identify. It's very interesting when self-identification, from a U.S. perspective, is hey, it's because it's a diversity initiative. In Europe, it comes up, hey, why do you need to know this information? So there's just different cultural nuances for self-identification. The way that the U.S. has done it, I think has been successful, is um, it's optional. So you say, hey, this is why we're doing it. It's not to hold your data in a particular location to go against you. It's really to help us make sure that we're doing things the right way. We've seen the opposite a little bit from the European perspective. People are very sensitive about their data, which they should be, and how they're identified in any type of data cluster. And so that is something that we're still going to have to work through. Also, how we identify those things, it's not consistent. So if you look at the census data for the US and you look at a census kind of identifier for Europe, it's very different. And then obviously when you go into Asia or Latin or in Africa, that becomes even more different. So we've got to look at ways to streamline that across the board, but also make sure that we are inclusive of everyone that could be affected by that kind of data report to make sure we have the right data. But right now, it's still pretty biased based on region where organizations or employees are at.
So maybe it's getting a position where companies think of different ways to promote getting this data and making sure that people understand why you're bringing that data in and making it a positive thing rather than a negative thing like you're doing in the US. So one of the things which more and more companies countries are requiring you to do is gathering data on how much you pay people and all of that sort of stuff. So what's your experience on that side? So more transparency on what you're paying employees.
I think it's important because then you got a kind of a bar of where you're paying, and people have the opportunity to identify if they're going to want to work for you from that perspective. From an employer perspective, you're always about negotiating the deal. So they put you in a kind of an area that's maybe not as comfortable because you can't negotiate as much as you would want to from that perspective. But it does really honestly allow you to get further along in kind of that equity pay piece of it. People can actually understand, hey, our salary range is, this dollar to this dollar, this pound to this pound. And you're going to get an offer somewhere in that range. It does allow you to always have kind of that benchmark. Now, I've seen employers try to get around that by giving very large ranges, and that has not worked out in their favor because no one wants to apply if they don't really know if there's a $70,000 difference from range 1 to range 2. It's not something that they want to be part of. But it does really allow you to be upfront, transparent, and allow everyone to know that everyone that's getting hired in this particular role is going to be in this range. And so you know that you're going to be somewhere in an equitable environment from that perspective.
Yeah, I know that there's a bit of data about men and women accepting jobs on, salaries, and women don't necessarily aren't as good as negotiating as men are. I mean, I think we're getting better. Women are getting better, but I think there is some there's been a survey carried out where women will just say thank you, and then a guy will say no, actually, I want more money or whatever. So it would be great to have a standard salary set and understand, wouldn't it? But I know we could talk about like the diversity or, you know, how much women get paid compared to guys. And I think there was a survey saying that we're 100 and so many years behind men on the, you know, the wage. But, you know, that's a whole different conversation, but we will get there.
Well, that gets back into cultural nuances too, by the way,
Yeah.
and also fearful of stereotypes. So when you look at kind of what you just mentioned, while someone will say, "Okay, I'll just accept it," sometimes it's because of what you're taught. Right? You're
Yeah.
taught that you have to just be grateful, and you have to be taught that. That, by the way, goes with the same with people of color when they push back. But I actually will say some of the best negotiators that I've had recently have been women
Really?
in salaries. I'm a component for that. I'm definitely a big feminist here. But I think that a lot of that just kind of comes into I don't want to come off as someone with an attitude, or I don't want to come up with someone that feels ungrateful. So I'm just going to accept what they give me. I think every employer, when you offer your initial salary, we know that there's going to be room for negotiation. So I always encourage everyone not to take the first offer that's sent over. Definitely negotiate from that perspective because there's always a little room for that. So if there's any women on the call here that are hearing that, I definitely want to make sure that you break that stereotype. I think it's really important that you get what you're paid, what you're worth from that perspective.
Yeah. So, what steps can organisations take to address biases and ensure fairness in sort of the global payroll side of things?
So we just talked a little bit about that about reporting, but you have to have it always at the forefront of the conversation. That's really important. You can't just say we're going to do this and not follow through. You have to have the follow up behind it. That's probably the number one thing. And then also ask yourselves, is this working? Is it not working? And what can you do to improve it? So just because you have your 10-step initiative, it may end up being a 15-step initiative or 20-step initiative because you have to kind of step back, rinse, repeat, and improve. Redo it again, fix that, do it again. That's what you have to kind of think through a little bit as you kind of talk about kind of building on this because it's not perfect. There's no perfect scenario for DEI inclusion for a business. It's all based on cultural nuances within that company and then where they actually have employees. As I mentioned earlier, every time you add a new employee in a different country, it changes your culture. So you have to think about how that's going to actually impact your business and these overall initiatives. Again, I'm one person that's a big component of DEI initiatives within organizations, but I also made the mistake in Brazil. I've made the mistake in South Africa, going with my own unique biases. So having to always be open minded, taking a step back, listening, having conversations, and making sure it's one of the priorities within the business is quite important.
So it's always reviewing. So it's just not just once, just keep reviewing and looking at your new employees and getting them involved, listening, understanding and reviewing.
Yeah. And looking in a mirror, making sure you're comfortable seeing, and sometimes the reflection is not good, right? Sometimes the reflection is not good, but how do you actually improve it, and how do you make sure that you make this a priority for the business?
So we've touched on technology and reporting. So how can technology and automation support, especially within the sort of global payroll management, really?
Well, I think there's a number of things that technology can do. Again, there's a lot of great systems out there that are really focused on really supporting businesses and their DEI initiatives and reporting. But it's making sure that you're keeping it up to date. I think that's really important. Making sure that you're communicating those initiatives and then leveraging that reporting. I'm big into beta testing and getting feedback when working with providers from that perspective. So if there's something that's missing within your technology, it's really important to provide that feedback to to whoever your provider is from that perspective, so that they can start to think about how they can give you the tools that you need. Now, as you know, feedback, they have to hear that consistently. So if we're all talking about it, then it becomes an investment that the technology organizations actually put into it. But making sure that you're asking them, hey, I need this, I get this, I need this, and how to actually improve that constantly to get to the point that you actually can just look at it and know what's going on within the business.
So we're coming towards an end, and obviously our audience, we've got a lot of payroll leaders. So is there anything in particular you think as a payroll leader they should be doing to drive the DE&I initiatives through more of a global payroll strategy? So is there anything that more they should be doing, or any tips or strategies that you would share?
Yeah, I think payroll is unique in the opportunity of they have the data points in front of them. And so, unfortunately, payroll has to partner with HR for this because payroll is not going to have necessarily all the key indicators for individuals when it comes to diversity and inclusion. Sometimes they don't even have gender or race or things like that outlined in their payroll reports. So, how do you actually combine HR's data points or information into the payroll endpoints, and then start to put reports together and say, hey, here's some of the patterns that we're recognizing, and constantly bringing those conversations up. I think here's the question I would have a payroll leader ask: why are you not involved in those conversations, and what data does the business need to help make decisions? And bringing that to the table almost every single week. I have a payroll leader within our organization that says that is the question they ask: our initiative is DEI. What information am I not providing to you that you need on a day-to-day basis to help make decisions, or every time you get a payroll report? And that I have to think about every single day. Every single week we have that meeting. I need to be able to say, okay, what do they need to get to me so I can make sure I can make the right decisions? And so it's just constantly asking that question with leadership, like, what am I not doing? What can I get for you? Here's some ideas I have, but what do you need to help make better decisions for these type of initiatives within the organization?
And I think, we always talk about getting payroll a seat at the table. This is another initiative that will help them get a seat at the table, surely.
Yeah, I think you've got to show value, right? And when you have these type of conversations, again, data shows that when you make this a priority, your business is very strong. It grows. It becomes very successful. So show that you're bringing this to the organization. It will have a huge return on investment if you do it the right way.
And which you said earlier, I didn't take a note of it, but actually doing DE and I, then you've got more chance of retention, happier team, more involved, more ideas, expanding an organization, better profits. I mean, the company are looking for better profits, aren't they, or a turnover? So it's a really important initiative, but also for an organisation, it's proven that it's a really good initiative. So thanks, Rick. I know we've got so much going on. We always talk about so much with our different LinkedIn lives, and you've got some stuff going on yourself, haven't you, with your organisation? So I've just got something that I'm gonna add to the presentation here.
Thank you. So we are we're building our HR and payroll technology, and we're doing beta testing. This is for my new organization. Some of you guys know I stepped down as the CEO of my other organization I founded to really focus on this program that we're launching. And so we're calling all HR professionals and payroll professionals for some beta testing to really show you guys what we're looking to build for the future of work. So please scan the QR code. We would love to have each and every one of you guys as part of our beta tester group for this amazing platform that we're launching later this year. But we want to get your feedback. We talked about your voice being important to us. So we want you to come to the table. We want you to come to the table hungry, because a closed mouth never gets fed. So your opinion and your experience is really important, because we want to make sure when we launch this that we've really thought about everything that you're looking at. And a big part of that is actually our diversity and inclusion reporting module, and kind of report from a payroll perspective and an HR perspective. So love to get your feedback here. Please sign up, scan the QR code on your phone, and one of our representatives will reach out to you once we get your information to get you and see if we can get you onto the beta program. But super excited to do this, and we're super excited to show off this amazing platform that we've built before we go to launch.
So I think in the 30 years I've been in the payroll industry, this is the first time that I've seen somebody come to market and just say, like, we want your feedback. So it's a really good opportunity for people really to get involved and see a new way. Get involved. So thanks so much, Rick. I'll see you in a month's time. Oh, there you go. We've got a question right at the end. Here we go. Oh, there you go. That might be one offline there. Somebody wants to come back to you, Rick. You got your team.
Well, I'll tell you, yes, if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, feel free to reach out to me directly. But this is after, yeah, so I still own Atlas to answer your question. I still own that organization, but I wanted to build something that was going to truly revolutionize the HR industry and payroll industry. And so this is this new product that we're launching here that's outside of Atlas. So feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn for those type of questions.
And that's for everyone. So Rick is one of the very few people that I know that will answer questions on LinkedIn. He's mostly better than I do because I sometimes forget, but I know Rick does get back to everyone. So please feel free to message Rick on LinkedIn. I hope you guys can join us next month. We've got a number of topics that we will be discussing, but if there's anything in particular that you would like us to discuss, please feel free to reach out to us anytime. And otherwise, I think that's it, isn't it, really? Have a good rest of the day, Rick, and enjoy Valentine's Day, everyone. And we'll see you in a month's time.
Thank you, Melanie. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.